There was a night, many winters ago, when I sat across from a man who had lost nearly everything a human being can lose. His fortune had collapsed within the span of a single season. His name, once printed in bold letters across the business pages of the great American newspapers, had been reduced to a whisper of pity. His friends, the kind who arrive with laughter when the wine is flowing, had vanished like smoke through an open window. And yet, as he leaned forward in that dim-lit study, sipping his coffee slowly, deliberately, I noticed something that startled me more than any tale of riches I had ever recorded. His hands did not tremble. His voice did not break. His eyes did not wander with the restless anxiety of a defeated man. He spoke of his ruin the way another man might speak of the weather. And when I asked him how such a calm could inhabit a man whose world had so recently caved in, he looked at me and said only this: "I have trained myself, Mr. Hill, to act as though nothing bothers me until the day came when truly nothing did." I have carried that sentence with me for the rest of my working life. I have tested it against the biographies of the great, weighed it against the habits of the small, and examined it through the lens of every principle I have ever drawn from the 500 most successful men of our American century. And I can tell you, without the slightest hesitation, that the man who learns to act as if nothing bothers him holds in his possession one of the most extraordinary weapons ever devised by the human mind. It is not denial. It is not coldness. It is not the performance of indifference worn by the insecure to shield their bruised vanity. It is something deeper, something older, something that reaches into the hidden architecture of the subconscious mind and rearranges the very foundation of a person's destiny. And what I intend to reveal to you tonight is the quiet science behind this mastery and the precise reason why those who possess it rise, while those who lack it remain forever at the mercy of every passing wind. Let us begin where all true understanding must begin, with the observation that the world does not break a man. The world only reveals him. When a storm descends upon two houses, one built upon sand and the other upon stone, the storm itself is identical. It is the foundation that differs, and so it is with the human soul. The events of life, the betrayals, the insults, the disappointments, the reversals of fortune, the cold glances of those whose approval we once sought. These events strike every man who has ever lived. They are the common inheritance of breath itself. What separates the achiever from the perpetually wounded is not the absence of such blows, but the inner foundation upon which those blows land. The man who has trained himself to remain unshaken does not live in a gentler world. He has simply constructed within himself a sanctuary that the noise of the world cannot penetrate. And I tell you now that this sanctuary can be built by any human being who understands the principle of autosuggestion and has the courage to apply it with persistence. But the most surprising part comes only now. You see, I once believed, as many young men do, that the calm of the great achievers was a gift of nature, a temperament bestowed upon them at birth by some generous accident of biology. I was wrong. I was profoundly wrong. In my 30-year study of the men who shaped our industrial age, I discovered that nearly every one of them had once been sensitive, reactive, easily wounded, and frequently overcome by emotions he could not master. They were not born calm, they became calm. They practiced it, they rehearsed it. They trained themselves day after day, year after year, to respond to provocation not with heat but with a chosen stillness. And this training, which the careless observer mistakes for natural temperament, is in truth the most disciplined and deliberate psychological labor a human being can undertake. It is the labor of self-mastery, and it is the price of any life worth living. Consider the young Andrew Carnegie, a Scottish immigrant boy of little means, working in the dust and clatter of a telegraph office. He was mocked by those above him, dismissed by those around him, and reminded daily of his smallness. But Carnegie had already begun to understand something that most men never grasp in a lifetime, that every insult absorbed without reaction is a coin deposited into the treasury of the self. He did not argue. He did not defend. He did not waste a single ounce of his mental fuel upon the opinions of those who had no part in his future. He simply continued. And by the time he had become one of the richest men the world had ever known, those who had mocked him were long forgotten, while his name had been carved into the stone of an age. This is the principle. This is the quiet mathematics of greatness. What Hill observed about this subject is deeply unsettling, and I must speak it plainly. Most human beings spend the majority of their waking hours in a state of emotional reactivity. Someone speaks sharply to them, and their entire afternoon is ruined. A driver cuts them off in traffic, and their blood pressure rises for an hour. A colleague fails to return a greeting, and they spend the evening rehearsing imaginary confrontations in the theater of their own mind. A stranger writes a cruel comment, and they lose sleep over the opinion of a person they will never meet. I have watched grown men, men of intelligence and education, squander the finest energies of their lives upon provocations that were, in the grand scheme of their purpose, less significant than a single drop of rain upon the ocean. And I have come to believe that the greatest thief of human achievement is not laziness, not ignorance, not even poor planning. It is the chronic surrender of one's inner peace to external disturbances that do not deserve it. Now I must introduce to you a concept that lies at the very heart of this teaching, the principle of the definite major purpose. A man who has a clearly defined purpose burned into his subconscious mind through the disciplined practice of autosuggestion possesses a natural immunity to the thousand small stings of daily life. Why? Because his attention is anchored. His inner compass is set. The petty disturbances that would devour the unfocused man slide past him like water over stone. He has somewhere to go, and the squabbles of the marketplace cannot distract him from the mountain he is climbing. But the man without such a purpose, the man who drifts through his days without a governing aim, is like a small boat without ballast upon a restless sea. Every wave rocks him, every breeze turns him, every passing ripple seems to him a catastrophe. If you wish to become unbothered, you must first become directed. The calm of the achiever is not an emotion. It is the byproduct of a life aligned with a purpose greater than the noise around it. There is a teaching here that I have drawn from my study of the great Stoics of antiquity, and which Emerson also understood in his own American way. The ancients believed that a man is disturbed not by events, but by his interpretation of events. And I have found this to be one of the most precise psychological observations ever recorded by the human species. The insult that destroys one man passes through another without leaving a scratch. The failure that crushes one entrepreneur becomes, in the hands of another, the very seed of his eventual triumph. The same cold word, the same rejection, the same loss, delivered to two different minds, produces two entirely different destinies. And the difference lies not in the event, but in the machinery of interpretation that each man has installed within his subconscious through years of habitual thought. Train the machinery, and you train the life. The detail most people overlook is hidden right here. When you react to a provocation, you are not merely expressing an emotion, you are reinforcing a pattern. Every time you allow a small annoyance to shake you, you are carving the neural groove a little deeper. You are telling your subconscious mind, this is the kind of man I am. This is how I respond. This is who I will be tomorrow. And your subconscious, which is the most faithful servant any man has ever possessed, obeys without question. It builds from your repeated reactions the permanent character that the world will one day call your personality. But the inverse is equally true, and this is where hope enters the room. Every time you choose stillness over reactivity, every time you absorb an insult without returning it, every time you observe a disturbance without becoming it, you are also carving a groove. But this groove leads upward. This groove leads to the mountain. This groove leads to the man you were always meant to become. Here begins the darkest game of the subconscious mind. For I must warn you that the practice of acting as if nothing bothers you is not, in its early stages, a comfortable practice. The ego rebels against it. The ego wishes to defend itself, to argue, to correct, to prove, to retaliate. The ego interprets every slight as a threat to its existence, and it cries out for the satisfaction of response. But the man who wishes to rise must learn slowly and patiently to starve the ego of its daily meal of reaction. He must learn to hear the insult and not feed upon it. He must learn to witness the provocation and remain unmoved. And at first, I will tell you plainly, this will feel unnatural. It will feel like swallowing fire. It will feel like a violence done to the self, but persist. Persist with the same stubbornness that Edison brought to his 10,000 experiments. Persist with the same quiet fury that Lincoln brought to his long string of defeats. Persist, because on the other side of this discipline lies a freedom you cannot yet imagine, the freedom of a man who no longer hands the keys of his kingdom to every stranger who passes by. The real turning point begins here. You must understand that when you act as if nothing bothers you, something extraordinary happens within the subconscious mind. At first, the action is a performance. You are pretending. You are wearing a calm you do not feel. But the subconscious mind does not distinguish between the performance of calm and the reality of calm. It accepts the performance as data. It accepts the repeated behavior as instruction. And over time, through the principle of autosuggestion operating silently in the deep chambers of the self, the performance becomes the reality. The mask becomes the face. The act becomes the man. This is one of the most powerful and least understood laws of the human mind, and it was understood by every great achiever I have ever studied, whether they articulated it in these terms or not. Behave as the man you wish to become, and the subconscious will, in time, remake you into exactly that man. Now let me speak of the modern age, for I know that those who hear these words live in a world very different from the one in which I did most of my work. Ours has become an age of perpetual provocation. The human mind is besieged, hour by hour, minute by minute, by a torrent of small irritations and manufactured outrages, the likes of which no previous generation has ever faced. A man cannot walk down the street without his attention being seized a dozen times. He cannot rest in the evening without his mind being flooded with the grievances of strangers. He cannot close his eyes at night without the echoes of 1,000 small disturbances rattling in his chest. And in this new landscape, the ancient practice of acting as if nothing bothers you has become not merely a virtue, but a survival discipline. The man who cannot master this practice in our age will be devoured by it. His nervous system will be shredded. His definite purpose will be drowned in the noise. His finest energies will be scattered across 1,000 small battles, none of which he chose, and none of which bring him nearer to the life he was born to live. What the lives of great achievers have been trying to tell us for centuries is this: the world will always have something to say about you. The world will always find a reason to criticize, to doubt, to envy, to ridicule. You cannot silence the world. You cannot reform it. You cannot persuade every voice to speak kindly of your dreams. But you can, through the disciplined practice of inner mastery, render the voices harmless. You can build within yourself a chamber so deep, so quiet, so anchored in your definite purpose, that the clamor of the outer world arrives at your door as a mere rumor, interesting perhaps, but never decisive. This is the state the ancients called equanimity. This is what the masters of every great tradition have pointed toward. And this is the inheritance available to any man or woman willing to pay the price of its cultivation. Let me now offer you a practical teaching, for I would be a poor guide if I left you with philosophy and no path. Each morning, before the affairs of the day begin, sit quietly for 5 minutes and repeat to yourself with feeling the following: today I will not surrender my peace to any person or any event. I will observe what arrives. I will respond with chosen wisdom, not with automatic reaction. I am the master of my inner kingdom, and no stranger shall be granted the throne. Do this every morning for 90 days. Do it whether you feel like doing it or not. Do it especially on the days when it seems absurd. For the subconscious mind is built not by occasional insight, but by repeated instruction. And what you whisper to it in the morning becomes, in time, the voice that speaks through you in the afternoon. This is autosuggestion in its purest form, and I have seen it transform men beyond all recognition. But there is a deeper paradox hidden within this teaching, and I must now bring it into the light, for without it, the practice becomes brittle and ultimately fails. To act as if nothing bothers you is not the same as to pretend you feel nothing. The great achievers I studied were not emotionless men. They were not cold machines. They were, in fact, deeply feeling human beings, men of passion, of love, of grief, of fierce longing. But they had learned the crucial distinction between feeling an emotion and being governed by it. They allowed themselves to feel the sting of an insult for a moment, and then they released it. They allowed themselves to grieve a loss for a season, and then they rose. They did not suppress their emotions into a hidden cellar where those emotions would one day rot and poison the whole house. They acknowledged, they honored, and they moved forward. This is the difference between mastery and repression, and you must understand it, for without it, you will confuse the teaching and harm yourself with it. There is also the matter of what the old philosophers called the 6 ghosts of fear: the fear of poverty, the fear of criticism, the fear of ill health, the fear of the loss of love, the fear of old age, and the fear of death. Every single one of these ghosts feeds upon your reactivity. Every single one of them grows stronger the more you allow small disturbances to shake you. When you learn to act as if nothing bothers you, you are not merely handling the irritations of the day, you are starving these 6 ancient ghosts of the emotional food that sustains them. You are conducting a slow exorcism of the forces that have haunted your race since its earliest days. And as these ghosts weaken within you, something remarkable begins to occur. You begin to act from a place of power rather than a place of defense. You begin to create rather than merely to react. You begin to build rather than merely to protect. And this shift, this subtle but total shift, is what I have called in my earlier writings the crossing from poverty consciousness into prosperity consciousness. It is the great migration of the soul, and it begins with a single decision, the decision to stop being disturbed by things that do not deserve your disturbance. And here I must pause and warn you of a danger. There is a false version of this teaching that has spread through the shallow waters of modern self-improvement, and I wish to mark it clearly so that you do not mistake it for the real thing. The false version says, pretend nothing matters, become numb, harden your heart, refuse to care. This is not mastery. This is emotional poverty disguised as strength. The man who has truly learned to act as if nothing bothers him has not ceased to care. He cares more deeply than ever. He simply cares about the right things, and he no longer squanders his caring upon the wrong ones. He cares about his purpose. He cares about the people he has chosen to love. He cares about the legacy he is building. And because he has gathered his caring into these sacred chambers, he has no surplus left to spend upon the petty insults of strangers or the small failures of the passing hour. This is the true teaching. Do not settle for the counterfeit. Here lies a hidden truth that I have rarely seen discussed even in the deepest circles. The man who acts as if nothing bothers him creates a gravitational field around himself. Other people sense it. They cannot name it, but they sense it. They find themselves behaving better in his presence. They find themselves speaking more carefully, listening more attentively, respecting him without quite knowing why. This is because the subconscious mind of every human being recognizes, on a level deeper than conscious thought, the presence of a man who has mastered himself. Such a man becomes, without trying, a center around which the lives of others rearrange themselves. This is the invisible architecture of leadership. This is the quiet authority of the achiever. And it cannot be faked. It cannot be learned from books alone. It must be earned in the daily furnace of self-mastery, one provocation at a time, one chosen stillness at a time, one refused reaction at a time. I think often of a passage from the writings of Emerson, that great American sage, in which he observed that what lies behind us and what lies before us are small matters compared to what lies within us. And I would add to his words my own, that what lies within us is not a fixed country, but a landscape we are building, stone by stone, with every thought we entertain, every reaction we permit, and every discipline we impose upon ourselves. The man who acts as if nothing bothers him is not a man who has conquered the world. He is a man who has conquered the small and constant rebellions of his own mind. And this conquest, when completed, is worth more than any empire ever built upon the outer earth. For it is the one kingdom that no thief can steal and no disaster can destroy. You may ask me now, Mr. Hill, how long does it take to build such a compass? How long before the performance of calm becomes the reality of calm? And I will tell you honestly that I do not know the answer for your particular life, for every soul carries its own history and its own resistance. But I can tell you this: it takes longer than you hope, and it takes less time than you fear. It takes longer than you hope because the subconscious mind does not change in a single afternoon, and the old habits of reactivity have been rehearsed across many years. But it takes less time than you fear because the subconscious mind, once it begins to move in a new direction, moves with astonishing speed. 90 days of faithful practice will produce results you did not believe possible. 1 year of faithful practice will make you a stranger to your former self. 3 years of faithful practice will render you unrecognizable to those who knew only the reactive man you used to be. And a lifetime of faithful practice will place you among the quiet masters whose names are spoken with reverence long after their bodies have returned to the earth. And so I return at last to that dim-lit study of many winters ago, and to the ruined man whose hands did not tremble. I understand now what I only sensed then. His fortune had collapsed, but his kingdom had not. His name had been whispered away, but his inner compass remained. His friends had vanished, but the only friend that ultimately matters, the mastered self, had remained faithful to him. And within 3 years of that evening, I watched him rebuild a fortune larger than the one he had lost, not because he was lucky, not because the times favored him, but because the man who cannot be shaken is the man whom opportunity eventually seeks out. Life itself, I came to believe, bends toward such men. The universe arranges itself around the immovable, and the practice of acting as if nothing bothers you is, in the end, the practice of becoming immovable, not in the sense of rigidity, but in the sense of depth, of rootedness, of that quiet oaken strength that storms pass over without disturbing. So I will leave you tonight with a question, and I would ask you to sit with it long after these words have faded. When was the last time you granted a stranger the power to disturb your peace? When was the last time you allowed a small thing to steal from you the finest hours of your day? When was the last time you handed the keys of your inner kingdom to someone who did not even know they had been given them? And if you cannot remember a day in the recent past when you did not do such a thing, then perhaps tonight is the night the covenant begins. Perhaps tonight is the night you decide quietly and without announcement that from this day forward you will act as if nothing bothers you. And you will practice this act with such patience and such persistence that one morning years from now, you will discover with a small and private smile that it is no longer an act at all, that you have become the man you were pretending to be, that the kingdom is finally, fully, and forever your own. And when that day arrives, I promise you, you will not need anyone to tell you that your life has changed. You will feel it in the silence of a mind that no longer flinches. You will feel it in the steadiness of a hand that no longer trembles. You will feel it in the quiet authority of a presence that has become at last truly its own. Until then, walk gently, practice faithfully, and remember that the man who cannot be shaken is the man whom destiny has always been waiting to meet.